"You're fired." I never thought I'd hear those words from my own father. But there he was, sitting behind his massive mahogany desk, looking at me like I was nothing more than an employee who had disappointed him, not his daughter, not someone who had worked for this company since she was 16, just another problem to get rid of. I tried to stay calm even though my heart was racing. The office, with its big glass windows overlooking Manhattan, suddenly felt small. The air was heavy. "Dad, if you'd just give me a chance to explain, the Henderson account." He raised his hand to silence me, not even letting me finish. "It's Mr. Matthews when you're in this office, Alexandra," he said sharply, "and the Henderson account was the last straw. Your so-called innovative approach cost us a $12 million contract." I gripped the arms of my chair, forcing myself to stay composed. My voice came out steady. The old approach wasn't working. We were losing them already. If we had just given my plan one more month. "Enough," he snapped, slamming his hand on the desk. His best CEO award trembled from the force. "This isn't some tech startup where you play around with experiments," he said. "This is Matthews & Sons, a company built on tradition, consistency, and results. We've done it the same way for 40 years because it works." I almost laughed at the name Matthews & Sons. The irony was painful. I had worked my way up from the bottom, literally starting in the mailroom at 16, learning every corner of this company. Meanwhile, my younger brother, David, waltzed in straight from business school and was made vice president within months. But Dad didn't want to hear that. He shuffled some papers on his desk and continued, his voice cold. "The board agrees. You're not cut out for this business, Alexandra. Maybe you should try something smaller, something easier, like a boutique consultancy or a little retail shop." His words hit me like a slap. I stood up slowly, brushing off my gray business suit, the same one I'd worn to meetings that brought in millions in revenue that apparently no longer mattered. "You're making a mistake," I said quietly. He didn't even look up from his papers. "HR will take care of your severance. Please pack your things by the end of the day." I turned toward the door but paused. My hand was on the handle when I spoke again. "Dad." He looked up, clearly annoyed. "Remember this moment." The walk to my office felt like a funeral march. I passed coworkers who quickly turned away, pretending not to notice. The news was already spreading. Janet, my assistant for the past 5 years, met me at the door. She looked heartbroken. "I heard," she said softly, following me inside. "It's not fair, Alex. Everyone knows we lost that account because David promised them deadlines we couldn't meet." I started packing my things into a cardboard box. "It doesn't matter. He's a son. I'm just the daughter who doesn't understand tradition." I took down my framed Harvard MBA, my awards, my certificates. I reached for the photo of my mother. She passed away when I was 12, but I still remembered her last words to me before the cancer took her. "Don't let them dim your light, sweetheart. Shine anyway." Janet watched quietly. "What are you going to do now?" I looked at the photo, then back at her. "I'm going to build something better," I said, "something bigger than Matthews & Sons ever dreamed of." Her face lit up with hope. "Do you need an executive assistant?" I looked at her, really looked at her. Janet wasn't just an assistant. She was one of the smartest, most organized, capable people I knew. She should have been running operations, but the company never gave her a real shot. "How about Chief Operations Officer instead?" I asked. Her eyes widened. "You're serious?" "Completely." I handed her my personal card, the one that didn't have the Matthews & Sons logo on it. "Call me tomorrow if you're in. And Janet, don't tell anyone about this yet." The elevator ride down felt surreal. 15 years of work, gone. I had sacrificed so much for that company, holidays, weekends, even my relationships, but in the end, none of it mattered because I wasn't a son. Outside on 5th Avenue, my phone buzzed. It was a message from David. "Tough break, sis. Don't worry, I'll take good care of your clients. Maybe retail was more your speed." I didn't reply. I just hailed a cab and gave the driver an address in Brooklyn. There was one person who always believed in me. 20 minutes later, I stood in front of a familiar red door. I knocked. It opened to reveal my grandmother, elegant as ever, her silver hair perfectly styled. "Alexandra," she said, her face tightening when she saw the box in my arms. "He didn't." "He did." She stepped aside and brought me into the kitchen. A pot of tea was already waiting, like she knew I was coming. Grandma Rose always knew. "Tell me everything," she said. So I did. I told her about the Henderson account, about how David made promises we couldn't keep, how Dad refused to listen, how the board backed him, how it all ended with those 2 words, "You're fired." When I was done, she didn't speak right away. She simply stood, went into her study, and came back with a large manila envelope. "I've been waiting for this day," she said, sliding it across the table. I looked at her, confused. "Your mother made me promise to give you this when the time came. She always knew it would." Inside the envelope was a sealed letter and a folder filled with documents. My eyes widened as I read them. "Grandma, this is your mother's inheritance," she said. "Everything she built before marrying your father, her shares in the shipping company, real estate, private investments, all in a trust, under your name. Your father never knew. It was millions, not as much as Matthews and Sons, but more than enough to build something big, something real. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because your mother wanted you to try his way first. She wanted to give him a chance to recognize your worth, but he failed, spectacularly." I sat back, still stunned, but slowly, a fire began to grow in my chest. The Henderson account didn't want tradition, they wanted innovation, they wanted the kind of vision I had proposed, and now I could offer it without anyone holding me back. Grandma Rose smiled. "So, what now?" I looked at her and smiled. "Now we show them what Alexandra Matthews can really do." I reached out my hand, calm but steady. "Matthews, Thomas," the man said, eyeing me with curiosity. "Any relation?" Before I could answer, my father jumped in quickly. "Just a former employee." But I smiled. "Actually, I'm his daughter, but that's all in the past. Let's begin the presentation." For the next hour, I laid out Nova Enterprises' strategy, everything my father used to call foolish, risky, or a waste of time, but here it was, working: AI-driven tools, cloud systems, real-time data dashboards, exactly what the Henderson Group had wanted from Matthews and Sons a year ago. My father had turned them down, now they were seeing it all from me. I watched David, my father's longtime business partner, grow redder by the minute as the board leaned in, nodding and scribbling notes. My father said nothing, but I noticed his hands clenching into fists beneath the table. When I finally finished, Thomas Henderson sat back and said, "Very impressive, Ms. Matthews. This is what we've been searching for, but tell me, why didn't you bring this to us when you were still with your father's company?" The room went silent. I looked directly at my father. "Oh, but I did. That was the last presentation I gave before I left the company. Isn't that right, Mr. Matthews?" His jaw tightened. He didn't respond, but everyone understood. Thomas stood. "Well, we've seen all we need, Ms. Matthews. Your proposal is what we need to move forward. I believe our legal team already has the contracts ready." "What?" David blurted out. "You can't be serious. We've handled your business for 20 years. And you've resisted every change for 20 years. Thomas replied firmly. "That's no longer good enough." As I watched them sign with Nova, I met my father's eyes. He looked old, tired, defeated, and while part of me felt a pang of sympathy, I remembered that day in his office when he dismissed me without a second thought, when he chose tradition over growth, and his pride over his daughter. That deal with the Henderson Group was just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, Nova Enterprises steadily won over one client after another, clients my father's firm had taken for granted. We didn't poach them, we didn't lie, we just offered them what they'd been asking for all along: progress. And one by one, they left Matthews and Sons. Then, one day, Janet, my assistant, burst into my office. "Alex," she said breathlessly, "you need to see this." She handed me her tablet. It was a news article. Matthews and Sons faces collapse amid client exodus. Bankruptcy looms. Underneath was a photo of my father, exiting his office, looking defeated. My phone buzzed. It was Grandma Rose. "I just saw the news," she said gently. "How are you feeling?" I looked out the window toward my father's building, the same one I had once dreamed of leading, the same one he threw me out of. "I didn't do this for revenge," I said. "I know, sweetheart, you did it because someone had to, because sometimes the only way to fix something broken is to build something better. They might lose everything now, unless someone steps in to help." There was a quiet understanding in her voice. Just then, Janet appeared again. "Your father's here," she said softly. "He wants to see you." I took a deep breath. Send him in. Alexandra, Grandma Rose said quickly, remember what your mother always told you? Don't let them dim your light. I said. No, darling, the other thing, sometimes the strongest bridges are built over the deepest divides. I ended the call and stood tall as my father walked in. His suit was wrinkled, his face drawn. He looked nothing like the man who fired me, more like a man who had been forced to face the truth. Alexandra, he said quietly, we need to talk. I motioned to the chair across from mine, the same position I'd sat in a year ago when he told me I didn't belong. He sat, and for the first time, I noticed how small he seemed. The board meets tomorrow, he began, voice rough. They're voting on whether to file for bankruptcy or seek a merger. David's already left, took a job with Goldman Sachs this morning. Of course he had. David always bailed when things got hard. And you're here because, I asked evenly. Because you won, he said, lifting his eyes to mine. You built something I said you couldn't, something better, and I was too proud to see it. I studied him for a moment. Did you ever wonder why I worked my way up from the mailroom instead of asking you for a top job like David? He shook his head. Because I believed in the company, I wanted to make it stronger. Every new idea I brought to you wasn't to erase the past, it was to help Matthews and Sons survive the future. And I shut you down, he said quietly. Yes. I walked over to the window, looking out over the city. You know what hurt the most? Not being fired, not even being passed over for David. It was that you never once asked why I believed change was necessary. He looked at me then. Why did you? Because business isn't about holding on to what worked yesterday, it's about building what will work tomorrow. I turned and walked back to the desk. Mom understood that. That's why her family's company survived when others didn't. His eyebrows rose. Her shipping company? I thought it was sold. No, Dad, it wasn't. I pulled out a folder. She left it in trust for me. She knew one day I'd need it, either to save Matthews and Sons, or build something of my own. He stared at the documents. Then, quietly, he said, she saw what I couldn't. What you wouldn't, I corrected. He looked at me with something new in his eyes, humility. So what now? He asked. You'll watch Matthews and Sons collapse? I pressed the intercom. Janet, bring in the proposal. She entered, handing me a thick folder. What's this? He asked. A merger proposal. Nova wants to merge with Matthews and Sons. His eyes widened. You'd buy us out? No, I'm proposing a partnership, combining Nova's innovation with your company's relationships and legacy, not erasing the past, evolving it. He looked stunned. You told me I wasn't cut out for business, I said, but real business isn't about power, it's about creating something that lasts. He picked up the proposal with shaking hands. And the name? Matthews Nova, I said. You'll be chairman emeritus, I'll be CEO, side by side. He studied the papers, then, for the first time, he looked at me with pride. Your mother would be proud, he said. We'll make this work. The board meets at 9 a.m., he added. Join me? I'll be there. After he left, I called Grandma Rose. We're merging, I said. Matthews Nova. She laughed softly. You've built quite a bridge, my girl. The next day, I stood beside my father in the boardroom where I'd once been dismissed. This time, we presented the future, together. The board voted unanimously. That afternoon, I sat in what was now my office, the same one my father once ruled from, but beside the old awards now stood a photo of Mom. Janet came in. Press release is ready. Want to read it? In a minute, I said. Call the Henderson group first. I want to tell them personally. Already did, she grinned. Thomas Henderson said, it's about time those Matthews women took charge. I laughed. That night, I placed a single white rose on my mother's grave. You were right, Mom, I whispered, about all of it. My phone buzzed. It was Dad. Dinner tomorrow? I want to hear more about that digital transformation plan. I smiled. Looking forward to it. As the sun set, I stood tall, not in anyone's shadow anymore. I was casting my own light. And this time, it was enough for all of us.